Peter Sharma with a new special program on the attack in Strasbourg. Lockdown in the French city of Strasbourg after a gunman opens fire near a busy Christmas market. At least 4 people are reported dead, according to local officials, and several others have been injured. One eyewitness overlooking the scene filmed the immediate reaction to the attack.
What happened was I heard 2 distinct noises, but I took them to be firecrackers. But when I turned around the corner, I did see one person on the ground with an apparent headshot wound, at least one.
While the gunman remains at large, French President Emmanuel Macron has attended an emergency session with his security staff in Paris. Welcome to BBC News. About 5 hours ago, gunmen opened fire on a Christmas market in Strasbourg, and according to the mayor of the city, 4 people have been killed, several others have been injured. The attack took place in the city centre. Police say they have exchanged fire with the attacker, who is known to the security forces. The city, which is home to the European Parliament, has been placed on lockdown, though we're hearing that MEPs and journalists have now been told that they can leave. Officials say that he'd previously, the gunman that is, been identified as a national security risk. Local media are reporting that police raided the suspect's home on Tuesday morning, but he managed to avoid arrest. We'll have more live from Strasbourg, but first, with an update, is Lucy Williamson reporting from Paris.
France tonight relived the terror of another attack. In the narrow streets around Strasbourg's Christmas market, riot police hunted a gunman who opened fire on the crowds here. His gunshots initially mistaken by one witness for fireworks. This footage shows the moment one of the victims was shot amid the chaos and panic of Christmas revelers. Peter Fritz witnessed one of the attacks.
Well, what I heard shortly after 8 p.m., I should say, were 2 distinct gunshots and people fleeing the place. Now, I wasn't sure these were actually gunshots, and I went around the corner and I saw a person with apparently 2 shots into the head lying on the bridge here. We tried to engage in resuscitation activities. We took him into a restaurant, which I'm in right now, and we tried for 45 minutes to resuscitate him.
The gunman is reportedly known to security services. The French government has told people to stay where they are. Lawmakers and staff have been locked into the European Parliament, just 15 minutes away from the scene.
Yes, our situation is exceptional. We cannot leave the building.
Well, the streets are empty. People have been asked to vacate the streets, to stay inside. Any hotels, restaurants, all the doors are locked, keeping people inside, and indeed in the European Parliament itself.
The President of the European Commission said tonight that Strasbourg was a symbolic city of peace and democracy, values, he said, that we will always defend. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Paris.
Well, a short time ago, the French President Emmanuel Macron arrived in Paris to a crisis meeting with cabinet officials. This was the scene a short time ago as he was making his way, calling an interdepartmental crisis centre, where he will be briefed by the security services. And we understand that Emmanuel Macron himself is going to address journalists here at the Interior Ministry building in Paris. This is the scene there live, where it's just gone 2 o'clock in the morning. We're waiting to hear from him. We know that the French counter-terrorism department have said this is now an ongoing investigation. The latest reports we're hearing is that the attacker, the gunman, is still at large, with a huge security and police search for him underway. There were reports that the gunman exchanged gunfire with the police some hours ago and then managed to escape. Unconfirmed reports that he sustained a gunshot wound in that, but we have not had further confirmation on that. But the mayor of the city confirming to the Reuters news agency that, and AFP, that at least 4 people have lost their lives in Strasbourg. The Christmas market, Kleiber Square, which is a huge tourist attraction at this time of year, as you can imagine, attracting millions of people every year, thousands at this time of year, was where the government. This was the scene there a little earlier, where reports were heard of those gunshots by eyewitnesses there. Another area of interest has been the South District of Strasbourg, Neudorf, which is where the gunman is believed to have resided and was also the point of an investigation on Tuesday morning during dawn raids, where the police carried out an operation investigating robberies and entered the gunman's home. The suspect, he was not there and managed to escape arrest there. But as we're saying, we're waiting to hear from Emmanuel Macron, and we understand he might be speaking alongside the Interior Minister there in Paris for a briefing. But watching these events unfold is Kasia Madero, who's live in Brussels for us. And Kasia, it'll be interesting to see what we hear now from the French President regarding their operation to try and locate and detain the gunman.
Yes, because this is an operation which is on événement en cours. It's an operation that is still very much active in terms of the search for this gunman. So the figures, the kind of detail that we're getting, there's still a lot of discrepancy. Ultimately, the most important thing to state is that the gunman is still on the loose, and authorities, security services very much want to get a hold of him. Events started much earlier on in the day at around 8 o'clock in the evening local time, when a shooting took place near that Christmas market, that incredibly famous, very popular Christmas market near one of the central squares, Place Kléber. The shooting lasted for around 10 minutes and it spread across around 3 separate streets. And we believe that 2 people were killed, but that figure could change somewhat after we hear from President Macron. We're expecting some kind of confirmation from him. Now, we know that initially, earlier on Tuesday morning, there was a dawn raid on a property in the southeast area of Strasbourg. It's called Neudorf, and this is the area where we believe it was the gunman's residence that was raided, but the gunman wasn't there. However, authorities found some grenades, and then thereafter shooting took place much later on, in 10 minutes worth of shooting near that Christmas market. And as you were saying, Babita, this is a really, really popular Christmas market. Millions of people visit this place. It's incredibly popular, and we've heard from the mayor of Strasbourg, Roland Ries, who's saying that the market will be closed on Wednesday. All the activities that take place, all the cultural spectacle, as he described them, will be halted on Wednesday as a sign of respect for those people who have lost their lives. And of course, well, not least, this is still an ongoing situation. Now, residents in Neudorf have been urged to stay indoors amid those reports that the gunman has been tracked to that area. But as I say, this is still an ongoing operation, very much an active operation, and security services as well in pursuit of this man. We know that he is 29 years old and he was known to the security services. He was on a so-called Fiche S. It's a list of hundreds of thousands of people who are monitored by the security services, who are believed as a potential security threat. But when you have got so many different people on that list, then obviously not everyone will be under surveillance. It's just simply impossible. These are the criteria to get on that list is particularly low, so hundreds of thousands of people are on this list, but this is a man who was known to authorities.
Okay, Kasia, I'm just going to interrupt you there, because we've just received some information from President Macron himself. I did say a little earlier, as we look at the scene live in Paris, we're expecting to hear some kind of a briefing from that emergency session there, that we might hear from the President himself. That is to be confirmed. We may well not, because he has just tweeted saying that he gives solidarity with the whole of the people at this hour. We think we're going to hear from the Interior Minister himself, Christophe Castaner, who has been one of the first people to talk to the press there about the incident that had occurred in Strasbourg a little earlier. But as we saw the French president attending that meeting, he has tweeted saying the solidarity of the entire nation is with the victims and their families in Strasbourg at this hour. We continue to bring you the scene there live, where we of course will update you on any news briefing that we get there, in particular probably expecting to hear about the operation and whether or not unconfirmed reports that the gunman has been cornered by police in some kind of a standoff, but we have not been able to confirm that as yet. All we know from a number of news agencies is that the police sources are saying that the gunman is still at large. That was the information that we got about half an hour or so ago, but we do know that that death toll, according to local sources in Strasbourg, has risen from 2 to now 4. Well, as you can imagine, when the gunman struck, it was a harrowing moment for witnesses, eyewitnesses who had gathered at the Christmas markets and indeed in restaurants and buildings nearby. Earlier, the BBC heard from Peter Fritz, who was an eyewitness who tried to resuscitate a Thai tourist who was shot by the gunman. As you'll hear, it took more than 45 minutes for proper medical attention to arrive.
Well, it seems I was witness to apparently the first incident that happened, and what happened was I heard two distinct noises, but I took them to be firecrackers. But when I turned around the corner, I did see one person on the ground with an apparent headshot wound, at least one, and his wife standing close by. He's a tourist from Thailand, about in his 30s, and we tried our best to resuscitate him. We applied CPR. We dragged him into a restaurant close by. I had help with some medical people from Germany, but it took more than 45 minutes for an ambulance to appear. Maybe the ambulance's way was blocked as well because of security precautions.
And how is the man? Were you able to resuscitate him?
After 45 minutes, we were told over the phone by an emergency doctor that any further efforts would be futile. He's still here in this restaurant, but we have abandoned all hope for him. And right now the authorities are carrying on the investigation.
So just to be clear, you have the body of someone who's been killed this evening in a restaurant, and the authorities are not coming to collect that body or to treat it?
Well, yes, no, right now they're present and they're doing everything they have to do. But of course, this is being treated, I guess, as a crime site, and therefore they won't go ahead and move him until they have an exact picture of the situation.
Well, this is an absolutely terrible development, both for the man who's lost his life and for those of you who've been caught up in this.
His wife is also still here. In a state of shock, but well unhurt.
I'm sure it's unimaginable for her this evening. Was this man the only person who was injured close to you, or were there other people who were struck by bullets?
Close to me, that was the only incident I witnessed, but I figure that there has been some further incident because I was on the edge of that Christmas market, on the outer perimeter, and apparently something bad has happened inside the Christmas market as well.
Peter, are you able to describe to me what's happening in the building where you are at the moment? How many people are there? What's the situation?
It's a typical Strasbourg restaurant, a wine tasting place, and people are just sitting there and being interrogated by the police and asked for whatever they can have witnessed.
And what have the police said to you?
Well, right now I was so busy talking to my station and to the BBC, so they haven't even approached me yet.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of when they might let you leave, are they giving any indication when people will be able to go outside again?
Not yet, no. I mean, I might even be able to go outside, but I wouldn't think it to be a totally wise move. And with this apparently dead person lying in the middle of the entrance hallway, I would more or less have to step over him. So I'd rather not.
There'll be a lot of people who are listening who are shocked at the situation that you're in and are concerned for the wife of the man who's died. Is she receiving the kind of support
Yes,
she very much needs at the moment?
Yes, definitely. She's being treated, she's being taken care of. And I heard talk of maybe bringing her to a psychiatric emergency ward for the night just for safety.
And when this happened earlier, how quickly did the attack begin and finish?
It was a matter of seconds. It was 2 shots being fired, and that took more or less 1 or 2 seconds.
And when it was happening, did you have any idea where those shots were coming from?
No. I was around the corner. I didn't even take it so seriously. It sounded like some petards to me, like some firecrackers.
And as we're talking, we're seeing lots of police on the streets now, but at the time, was there a big police presence in that part of Strasbourg?
Well, there's the usual presence. The Christmas market in Strasbourg is obviously, and has been for a long while, a matter of interest, a matter of focus when it comes to police work. It's the biggest such market in France, and of course, there was always talk of it maybe one day being a target.
Well, Peter, we appreciate you speaking to us. I'm imagining the atmosphere in this restaurant at the moment is one of profound shock.
Yeah, that's true, but also some kind of agitation. I mean, the people are, trying to help the police, trying to help the wife of the victim. So, yeah, everybody's just trying to do the best here.
That was an eyewitness account by Peter Fritz given to my colleague Ros Atkins some hours ago, about 2 hours or so after the shooting occurred at the Christmas market in Strasbourg. A harrowing account there of what he saw. I just want to give you an update, a line of information coming to us from our Europe editor Gavin Lee, who said that journalists and MEPs are now being told they can leave the European Parliament in Strasbourg after being ordered to remain inside for 5.5 hours during the manhunt for the gunman. We still understand that many places are in lockdown and the city centre itself has been completely evacuated as this operation continues to locate the man himself. Well, let's get more now on the counter-terrorism operation that might be underway at the moment. Dr. Joseph Downing is an expert on French security and politics at the London School of Economics and joins me now. Forgive me, Joseph, I'm just going to interrupt you there by heading straight to Paris, where this is a scene live where we are going to hear a statement, possibly in French, so we'll try and get a translation on that in English, but we'll just listen in very quickly if we can.
Il a blessé 19 personnes, dont 6 au moment où je parle, sont en urgence absolue. Les militaires de la force Sentinelle ont fait usage de leurs armes pour tenter...
Okay, as we thought, the press conference there in French will get you an update on all the lines of information that's coming from that security briefing in Paris. We understand that Emmanuel Macron has sent his Interior Minister, Christophe Castaner, to Strasbourg to facilitate what is now a ongoing terrorist operation to locate the gunman at the moment. Watching this with me and listening to that is Dr. Joseph Downing. Forgive me for interrupting there as we continue with this breaking news. Obviously now a live active situation to locate the man. As far as we know, the latest is that he remains at large. Talk us through what the systems are in place in France for an investigation of this kind now when we look at a terror investigation.
Yeah, so what's been confirmed so far by the French authorities is that the prosecutors opened officially a specifically terrorist investigation. So this will enable the French security services to kind of spring into action and work under that sort of common rubric that this is some kind of terror-related type incident. So they'll be looking at making connections between the individual that they have as a suspect, to see what networks he's associated with, if any, to see what other individuals he's associated with, if any, to see what crime networks he's associated with, if any, and to begin to sort of map out that bigger picture of a social network that really has enabled this attack to take place. Even if this is someone that's acted on their own, they would have got the arms to do it from somewhere, right? It isn't possible for this individual to be totally alone. He may have got the arms under the pretense of committing a crime, which is quite common in France. Arms are very easy to come by. We can see that the police have confirmed they've seized some grenades from the suspect's apartment this morning. It's frighteningly a common occurrence.
Indeed, and more details, Joseph, appearing now, emerging even as we continue to watch that briefing. Let's take you to that scene there live, where I can tell you some information that's being told to us from the French Interior Minister. The person that's speaking at the moment is Christophe Castaner, who is confirming that 3 people have been killed in this gun attack in Strasbourg. That's 3 people. And he has also confirmed that the shooter is still on the run. This is a press conference that you're watching live on BBC News, where it's approaching 20 minutes past 2 in the morning in Paris, after an emergency session was held with the President Emmanuel Macron, the Interior Minister and all the security services. And this is the press briefing that is currently underway there. And as we had initially reported, Joseph, that the gunman is still at large, a hugely worrying and incredibly trying time for the security services, as utmost importance will be for them to detain and track this man.
Definitely. And anyone that's ever looked at any kind of investigation or counterinsurgency that's taken place in a built-up urban area will know that trying to find a particular individual at any given moment is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. And they will, I think, be rightly very concerned as to whether this individual seeks to go out in a kind of blaze of glory. Will he seek to make a last stand like Mohamed Merah or some of the individuals involved in the Hyper Cacher siege in Paris? This is the absolute worst outcome for the security services. And
as we see them vacate that room there, they've just left a short time ago, and we understand that the French Interior Minister has confirmed that border controls have been strengthened, as you would expect in a situation of this kind. We saw that with the London terror attacks, we saw that with the Paris attacks, the Charlie Hebdo attacks in 2015, that is an immediate and strategic response, isn't it?
Definitely, and especially the geography of the region makes this ever more important, because Strasbourg is literally very close to the border with Germany, and the last thing that the kind of French security force will want is this security situation to spill out into another European state, to have to conduct a manhunt or manhunts over in German territory. They will seek to contain this if they can.
Yes, indeed. Let's just talk about what we know about the suspect. We understand him to be a 29-year-old male that was living in the South District of Strasbourg, an area called Neudorf. That was the point of a dawn raid on Tuesday, where the police were investigating robberies in the area, and the gunman's home was in fact raided. He was not there at the time. What is your assessment of what we can link from that to what has occurred later on today?
Well, I mean, pretty much everyone that's committed a terror attack on French soil, and many of those that committed terror attacks on British soil in the past decade, actually have a criminal past. This is a very common profile of people that go on to commit terror attacks, that they're often involved in petty and violent crime. In France specifically, this is a huge issue, because the proliferation of arms into even very petty crimes is quite serious. So often you'll have, you know, corner shops or cigarette kiosks held up with Kalashnikov assault rifles, which is like deeply worrying. So these individuals can use those criminal networks, if they do then want to commit some kind of attack of mass violence, can quietly get quite serious weapons. I mean, that is not the kind of be-all and end-all of terrorism. We can see that the Nice attacker used a lorry, for example, right?
Sure, but what you're talking about is the hallmarks of what we saw occur in Brussels as well.
Totally, yep. And it's a huge, in continental Europe, it's a massive problem.
Can I just ask you about the watch list that we're hearing a lot about? That we understand this suspect was known to the authorities. He was on what they call a watch list in France. Talk me through what that is exactly, and what criteria requires for a name to be put on there.
Well, it's a very sort of very bureaucratic, very complex and very French approach to trying to build a typology of those that are threats to the state. So he's under the Fiche S category. There are many other categories, and to get on that list, the bar of entry is actually quite low, and getting on that list actually doesn't mean very much. So as your fellow reporter said, there are upwards of 400,000 people on watch lists in France. They could be bank robbers, they could be radical anarchists, they can be mafia figures, they can be a whole range of different people. So you don't actually have to do that much. And getting on the list doesn't actually come with an obligation for surveillance or for the curtailment of freedom. That is all down to a judge. And this, for me, is where I see this system as being not fit for purpose. It sucks in way too broad a net of individuals for any sort of deeper analysis of their threat to be undertaken.
We're going to hear more from you, Dr. Joseph Daniel, but for now, thank you very much. Not to mention, of course, the fact that France has heightened its terror alert activity since, of course, a number of attacks, including dating back to 2015 with those Charlie Hebdo attacks that you may remember. Just a reminder of the breaking news in this hour that a man has struck in Strasbourg, targeting the Christmas markets there, which were heavily busy at the time of the attack some 5 hours ago. We understand from an emergency briefing session in Paris that 3 people were killed in the attack and that the gunman is still on the run. This is your breaking news this hour. Stay with us for more here on BBC News.
Hello. You can expect a definite chill in the air over the next few days, particularly as a biting wind picks up. But for western parts of the UK, there is a little bit of rain in the forecast. What we've got on the satellite picture from a little earlier on is this stripe of cloud. It's a frontal system pushing in from the Atlantic. It is bringing some outbreaks of rain. But whereas we might normally expect a front to sweep through, bringing rain for all of us, this front is running up against some resistance, this area of high pressure blocking the front's progress. So it won't get much further than the southwest of England, Wales, Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland. Here some rain, but elsewhere Wednesday getting off to a largely dry, if rather cloudy start with the odd fog patch. Through the day we should see brighter conditions spreading from the east, so more in the way of sunshine, but with that some colder air spreading from the east as well. So the mildest weather will be in the west, 10 degrees in Belfast, in Stornoway and in Plymouth. Now as we go through Wednesday evening into the night, we'll see more and more clear skies filtering through. Still a bit of patchy cloud, but where the skies do stay clear and starry for any length of time where you are, it is going to get a little bit chilly. You can see the pale green and blue colours here on our temperature chart. Our towns and cities around about 2, 3 or 4 degrees, but some spots in the countryside can expect a touch of frost. And then into Thursday, well, this weather battleground continues. Frontal systems still trying to bring rain in from the west, high pressure blocking their progress. And around this high, at this stage, we're going to have an increasingly brisk east or southeasterly wind, and that is going to make it feel cold. So on Thursday, any wet weather really confined to the far southwest of the country, particularly parts of Cornwall. Elsewhere, largely dry, apart from the odd shower, just sprinkling in across the North Sea coast. There will be some spells of sunshine, but look at the strength of the wind, particularly in some southern and western areas. And temperatures, well, on the thermometer, not particularly impressive, but add on the strength of the wind, this is what it's going to feel like. If you're spending your day in the Channel Islands, it'll feel sub-zero. Norwich, Birmingham, it'll feel like freezing. A very, very chilly feel to the day. Now on Friday, the winds will be a bit lighter, so it may not feel quite as cold, even though the temperatures will still be quite low. A change, as you can see, though, as we get on into Saturday, because those fronts in the Atlantic will make a bit more progress by this stage. We'll see some windy weather, some very wet weather for some, and as the fronts run into some cold air, especially over high ground in the north, there could be some snow.
To Sharma, our breaking news this hour. A gunman has opened fire in the French city of Strasbourg near a busy Christmas market. In an emergency meeting in Paris, the country's interior minister confirmed that the gunman is still on the run after killing 3 people and wounding a number of others. Security forces engaged the gunman in a 10-minute shootout before he managed to escape. Much of the city, including the nearby European Parliament, remains closed off. Officials say the attacker had previously been identified as a national security risk. It's understood the police raided the suspect's home on Tuesday morning, finding a number of grenades, but he was not present at the address at the time. French authorities have launched a terror investigation, and the French President Emmanuel Macron has expressed his solidarity for the victims involved in the attack. Our top story for you here in the UK. Theresa May has visited a number of European leaders trying to rescue her Brexit deal. But at home, a leadership challenge looks increasingly likely. More from you, but first, here's Asia Business Report.
Huawei's chief executive has been granted bail. Now Donald Trump says he may intervene over Meng Wanzhou's case if it would help get a China trade deal. Narendra Modi gets his man. India's former Economic Affairs Secretary is the new central bank governor. Good morning, Asia. Hello, world. It is a Wednesday. Glad you could join us for another exciting midweek edition of Asia Business Report. I'm Rico Hizon. We start off with a Canadian judge who was granted Huawei's finance chief bail. Meng Wanzhou was arrested at the request of the United States. And in response, the company said, quote, "We have every confidence that the Canadian and U.S. legal systems will reach a just conclusion in the next proceeding." And over the last hour, President Trump has weighed into the case, saying he would consider intervening in the case of Huawei's CFO if it would serve national security and help with a China trade deal. Our North American technology reporter Dave Lee brought us all the details.
We know that Meng Wanzhou is going to pay 10 million Canadian dollars in bail money. That's around 7.5 million US dollars. Conditions of her bail are pretty extensive. She'll have around-the-clock surveillance. She'll need to check in every single day with a bail officer. She'll also wear an electronic tag around her ankle, and as well as the bail money that she's going to have to put up, the judge also has demanded sureties from other people that know Ms. Meng in Canada and can provide guarantees against her fleeing those charges. Those people in no particular order include a yoga instructor, an insurance salesman, a housewife and an estate agent, putting together an additional $3 million in bail money, in assurances, and the judge is satisfied that that's going to be enough to prevent Ms. Meng from being a flight risk. But it has to be said that Canadian and US prosecutors still strongly think that she is a risk, so I guess now we just have to wait and see.
A tight leash indeed for Meng Wanzhou in Canada.
Yes, absolutely, and the next phase of this, of course, is extradition proceedings. The US has 60 days from the arrest, which was on December the 1st, to lodge its formal application for extradition. The process of whether extradition will be granted could take an awful long time. Some experts say even years, as the process could go through a number of appeals. So at least for that time, it does seem that Ms. Meng will not have to spend that in a Canadian jail, but will spend it in one of the 2 homes that she owns in Canada, and that those proceedings will presumably get underway fairly shortly. The next court date is going to be at the beginning of February next year.
Dave Lee there. A day after Urjit Patel's surprise exit as the head of the Reserve Bank of India, Shaktikanta Das has been appointed as the new boss of the central bank. Mr. Patel's resignation triggered a sell-off in the currency, the rupee, on concerns that Narendra Modi's government is threatening the Reserve Bank's independence. The BBC's Samir Hashmi has more from Mumbai.
Mr. Shaktikanta Das has been appointed as the 25th governor of the Reserve Bank of India. His appointment comes just a day after Urjit Patel stepped down as the head of India's central bank. Mr. Das is a career bureaucrat who has served in various departments of the government. In 2016, he was the Economic Affairs Secretary at the time when the government decided to ban 86% of the currency in the country. He was one of the key persons who led that project and was seen as a very powerful aide of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, Mr. Das's appointment comes at a time when the government and the RBI have been locked in a very public feud over some of the policy decisions that were taken by the government. In fact, many critics and observers believe that Mr. Patel resigned because the RBI was under tremendous pressure from the government to change some of those decisions. And these events have really raised huge concerns with regards to the RBI's autonomy. And that's why Mr. Das's biggest challenge is to reassure investors that he will operate as an independent head of the Reserve Bank of India despite his proximity to the Indian government. And that's why the steps that the Reserve Bank of India takes over the next few months under his leadership will be watched very closely, because based on those decisions, investors and the markets at large will gauge whether the Reserve Bank of India continues to remain an autonomous institution in the country.
Samir Hashmi, Google's chief executive, has told the U.S. Congressional Committee that this organization steers clear of political bias and insisted that was a core principle of the business. Our media editor Amol Rajan has a story.
A soft-spoken Tamil engineer who embodies the ambition of India's diaspora, Pichai Sundararajan, better known as Sundar, is shy by nature.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony...
Just like Mark Zuckerberg then. But whereas Facebook's founder, CEO, chairman and majority shareholder has taken a very public beating this year, Google's boss has resisted interrogation in Washington. The 46-year-old has been in charge of Google for 3 years and took home around $200 million in 2016.
If you Google the word idiot under images, a picture of Donald Trump comes up. I just did that.
He faced a barrage of questions about alleged anti-conservative bias.
Google could well elect the next president with dire implications for our democracy.
How do you explain this apparent bias on Google's part against conservative points of view?
And I can assure you, we do it without regards to political ideology. Our algorithms have no notion of political sentiment in them.
Pichai denied widely reported secret plans to re-enter the Chinese market.
I am concerned that you are now going back into China.
Congressman, at the outset, right now we have no plans to launch in China. We don't have a search product there.
And if I move from here...
As with Zuckerberg's testimony earlier this year, it felt at times as if the lawmakers and their witness inhabited parallel worlds.
Does Google, through this phone, know that I have moved here and moved over to the left? It's either yes or no.
Not by default. There may be a Google service which you've opted in to use.
Google's boss was also relatively unscathed on questions of tax and gender equality among staff. Unlike Facebook, Google have been canny about structuring their company in a way that dissipates power, responsibility and blame. Yet Sundar Pichai is fast becoming the face of a company that might, just might, have peaked. Internal tensions, macroeconomic instability and, above all, the fierce gaze of lawmakers across the globe all point to a tougher future.
This hearing is adjourned.
The format of these interrogations, with just 5 minutes for each questioner, limits their ability to land heavy blows. Google will be relieved tonight, while their enemies will rue a missed opportunity. Amol Rajan, BBC News.
The U.S.-China trade war and Brexit are continuing to dominate global markets. Asian stocks have opened for business, and they're currently up by more than 1% for Japan and Hong Kong. Well, market strategist Michael McCarthy told me what's behind these moves.
Well, judging from the overnight action, that reports out of Beijing that there's consideration of cutting tariffs could be the dominant factor. In overnight trading, we saw real support for risk assets. In particular, shares rose very strongly in Europe, and we saw good support for oil, other energy complexes, and also for the base metals that are key industrial inputs. So it does look like this news has really cheered investors around the globe. Local factors in the US soured the US trading session at the end there as Democrats and Republicans went head-to-head, but the overall global impulse and the move away from safe havens like gold and bonds suggests it's that tariff news that might really affect trading in the Asia-Pacific region today.
What about this potential tit for tat between Canada and China?
It's certainly of concern to global markets that there appears to be an escalation on this side of the issues between China and the US. However, many will see it as a diplomatic rather than an economic measure, and for that reason they might put more weight on the economic measures surrounding these current trade disputes.
All right, looking ahead to 2019, what are the risks you're looking at?
The key risks at the moment remain those to global growth, in particular trade disputes, but other factors that could slow global growth over the course of 2019. And of course, one of the keys to that is the actions of central banks. We know that the ECB will stop buying bonds. We know the Fed is likely to continue raising rates. And it's that tightening of policies around the globe that might really see a further increase in volatility for traded markets.
And briefly, what are your top 3 markets in 2019?
The Hong Kong market is an absolute standout. Valuations are very low, and the recent rebasing we've seen of shares in Hong Kong make it very attractive from a global point of view. The surprise might well be the UK market. It's under pressure at the moment. While the Brexit is weighing on it, we could see a longer-term benefit coming through and a rise in the FTSE 100. They're 2 key markets for 2019.
And as Michael McCarthy of CMC Markets in Sydney mentioned, you have the U.S.-China trade talks, Brexit, and the slowing global economy and higher interest rates impacting global financial markets and the currency markets as well, where the euro-dollar is 1.1333, the dollar-yen cross rate at 113.8, and we're also seeing a rise in crude prices overnight and in Asian trade, with light sweet crude at $52.28 and Brent crude crossing over that $60 mark. Thank you so much for investing your time with us. I'm Rico Hizon. Sport Today is coming up next.
You're watching BBC News. Reminder of our breaking news this hour. A gunman has opened fire near a Christmas market in the French city of Strasbourg. At least 3 people have been killed and several have been injured. Police are reported to have cornered the gunman as much of the city, including the European Parliament, remains on lockdown. Well, our correspondent Gavin Lee has more on the search for the suspect in the shooting incident.
We have a situation where clearly you have what they call the Sentinel team. So this is, a small number of the 10,000 military, the 5,000 police that were deployed together to work as a unit and protect some of the bigger cities and towns in the aftermath of the 2015 Paris attacks. They were monitoring, and that some of those teams, in small numbers, between 2 and 4, were patrolling the Christmas markets we hear tonight. There were people, as they entered the market, being back-checked. Given the security concerns about big towns and cities, it's the second highest level alert of a security alert in France at the moment. The other thing to point out was the attacker was reportedly shot and injured tonight by soldiers shortly after he first carried out the shooting. This is around 8:20 in the evening. There's a journalist for TV3 in France, TV3 in Paris, who said he witnessed the shooting of the individual by soldiers and this individual managed to run away. Now this fits with the picture we're also hearing from police sources. There are 2 particular areas where police are focusing their search. One is the area where the individual's flat is said to have been raided, in an area of Neudorf in the city, just south, very close to the European Parliament, as a suburb of Strasbourg, and there is a particular park there where it is believed that this man may have been hiding for hours, called the Parc d'Etoile, the Star Park. Quite a big area, and that's key.
Gavin Lee there reporting a short time ago. Well, let's just update you on a briefing that took place after an emergency session was held in Paris with the French President Emmanuel Macron and also the Interior Minister Christophe Castaner, who addressed the awaiting press there and confirmed that 3 people had lost their lives in this gun attack, and also, more worryingly, had confirmed that the gunman is still on the run. He has not been detained by the police, and as you can imagine, a huge police operation is now currently underway. The Interior Minister also confirmed that the borders have been strengthened. Of course, Strasbourg bordering between France and Germany there, and protocol is now in place, as you would imagine, with a terrorist operation that is underway, which was confirmed by the French counter-terrorism prosecutor, who said this was indeed a terrorism incident. The gunman